Welcome to Health in Veritas. I'm Harlan Krumholtz.
And I'm Howie Foreman. We're physicians and professors at Yale University. We're trying to get closer to the truth about health and healthcare. Our guest today is Dr. Stephen Knight. But first, we always like to start off with a quick hit. And I also have a follow-up question from a listener who wrote in. So, Harlan, go ahead and then let me ask that question.
Yeah, I know we want to spend some time on this listener comment, so we'll save that for most of this first piece. But I did want to just start off with some good news. Good news, Howie.
We need good news.
Well, we always need good news. Oh, my God, we're going into the election. People hear this on Thursday. There's so much anxiety and tension in the country. Let's talk about something positive. And across the U.S., I don't know if you've been noticing this, but respiratory illnesses are really hitting a low note, which is really exactly what we want. Like, look at COVID. The activity's on the decline. Wastewater levels, emergency visits, way, way, way down. CDC's reporting this.
Yep.
The new variant's not really causing much concern. The updated vaccines are said to offer solid protection for what's out there. But again, we're sort of at this low point. Flu, you can barely find it. Minimal flu activity so far. If you look at the map for CDC, very little. Great time maybe to get your flu shot because we're at the nadir.
I agree. Yep.
By the way,
I got both my shots.
RSV, me too. RSV is down. Levels are really low. Mycoplasma pneumonia. Little bit of uptick among kids. By the way, I heard this from my son. That someone in daycare with my grandchild has had an episode like that, but still generally low. And it's a moment to sort of opine, like, what's going on here? Is it warmer fall weather? Is it increased immunity? Public health awareness? Are we just darn lucky right now? But anyway, I just wanted to start off with
knock on wood. Yep.
Especially you scare us about, a new flu,
I know
this and that. So anyway, it's time people.
Yeah, no. It's good to hear good news.
I was on the train yesterday and felt less concerned than usual that, I was going to catch anything because all of this is where we are. So anyway, I want to start with that. But let's get to this letter because you get something from a listener.
Yeah, so we got a note from a listener about a recent episode where you and I talked about the physician shortage and efforts to ameliorate it with faster tracking of trained international medical graduates. And the listener raised a few points. I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but I'll just summarize them real quick. One, challenged my assertion that medical education is expensive. Two, whether there really is a shortage. And even if there is it structural or just temporary? And then related to that, whether AI is being underestimated in its effect on physician demand and supply, because that might make all the difference. And maybe all this worry about the shortage is very, very short-sighted. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on any of those points.
I've got thoughts on all. First of all, let me just start with a little gratitude. We always appreciate hearing from listeners. And, it's fascinating thing. You know how positive I am about AI. And I just saw a really remarkable demonstration. So the Yale New Haven system is now going to implement what's called ambient AI. I've talked about it on the podcast before. This ambient AI, this company, Abridge, is the group that Yale's going with. And we saw a demo where there was a conversation between two people. It was a simulated conversation as if it were a patient. Someone was interviewing our chief data officer, Lee Schwam, an accomplished academic we're lucky to have at Yale, come down from Boston and is leading these efforts around integrating AI into our system. And we've had Lee on. The ability to translate common conversation into really clear and advanced medical documentation blew me away. Because often when we're using Alexa or Siri, it doesn't even hear us or listen to us.
Yeah.
The words wrong. We dictate. I'm dictating on the iPhone and it's getting, words wrong. The ability for this thing to listen and even slang and all these things, and then translate those concepts. We talked to Michael Schmerling last week, and he was talking about how, the ability to take words in common conversation isn't easy. It's not trivial at all. And this system was doing it well. I believe we're on this moment where there's some possibility that we may have a physician surplus, because what we're going to be in a position of is force multiplying what physicians are going to be able to accomplish and what people who are trained as non-physicians are going to be able to do many tasks that right now are landing at the feet of physicians, that they don't need all that medical education to do. whether that's pattern recognition, whether it's documenting, whether, there's so much time that's spent by physicians
Yeah.
doing things that are clerical in nature that really could be subsumed by other tools that I wonder. Now, of course, the physicians who are doing procedures, that's a whole nother different ballgame with aging population, the need for orthopedic surgeons to do hip and knees, the need for people to be doing, kind of technical procedures will maybe where there really will be a crunch. But this AI is going to be a real push. Now, that's why I think there'll be attention. There will be certain areas where we really will be needing greater capacity, but there will be lots of other time that's freed up. And if need to be smart about in the future training and so forth, then I would like us to be able to train more individuals if necessary in order to expand this. But yeah, I think it was interesting what this person raised. I think they were wrong to suggest that we didn't see the connection. I think we do.
I
Between
think we've said it in previous episodes, but I think it was useful for them to just remind us that we talk about AI, we talk about a physician shortage, and we hadn't brought it all together in that episode. So it was a good prompt.
also importantly, it'll help us perform better. So yeah, I mean, the whole profession is going to change, but I do think there will be sets of areas where physicians are desperately needed that do work that only physicians can do, and we'll need to concentrate on closing that gap. But the AI is definitely going to help, no question about it.
That's great. Thanks for answering that.
Yeah, so let's get on to our interview. Steve Knight's going to be terrific.
Dr. Stephen Knight is the managing partner and president of F Prime Capital, a venture capital fund that invests predominantly in healthcare and technology firms. It has more than $4.5 billion in assets under management and boasts over 300 portfolio companies. Dr. Knight currently holds and has previously held positions on the board of many healthcare companies, including now publicly listed firms such as Beam Therapeutics, Ironwood Pharmaceuticals, Prime Medicine, and Proteostasis Therapeutics. Before joining F Prime, he worked at AT&T Bell Labs, consulted for Arthur D. Little, and served as the president of Epix Pharmaceuticals for 7 years. He received a bachelor's in science in biology from Columbia University. He also attended Yale Medical School, where he simultaneously obtained an MBA from the Yale School of Management even before we had an MD-MBA program. And what is more to mention at this time is he has been teaching one of the most highly successful courses at the School of Management, covering the life science industry and beyond. So first of all, I just want to welcome you to the podcast. It's great to have you. Very often our guests know Harlan better than me or me better than Harlan. In this case, you know each of us in completely independent ways. And it's just a pleasure to have you here. And I wanted to do what I do when I have you talk to my students and just give us a brief summary of how you made these pivots early in your career to go from medicine into consulting, and then eventually moving into the field that you're in right now.
Well, thanks for having me. I was an English major until the very end. And at some point, I had an epiphany that I wanted to go into science. And it was probably related to the fact that my dad was a physicist. And I don't know if my foray into English was more a function of a reaction or love. But at some point I decided this writing is really hard and it doesn't come easy. I love it when it works well, but it's really hard. So I went back towards the end and got interested in neuroscience. And at the time, people were talking about AI. It was a different era. And I got involved in fiddling around, simulating neurons, and went to NIH and then to Bell Labs. I quickly was self-aware enough to realize, as I was trying to teach myself all this math, that there was just no way for me to compete in this kind of field that seemed like it was magic to me. So I thought I'll go to medical school, and that's when I applied. But in any event, one of the things I started, my research had changed, and I changed it over to doing clinical AI, which I thought was really cool and amazing, even though it was just rule-based with some Bayesian statistics embedded in it. And so that's how I ended up over at SOM. Some friend of mine at Yorkside Pizza said there's a business there. Now, I didn't even know what a business was. And he was wrong about that. But I did go over to the business school, and there was somehow someone told me to talk to the admissions director, and it's a guy named Silverman, I think. And he said, why don't you just apply? And so I really liked being in a university. When I was there, I was thrown into just a different group of people. And it was just kind of a different world that had opened up. It was also the same time Genentech was just born. So this whole idea of biotech did not exist. Now, once I started reading up on biotech, that something just clicked. And I saw this, you could understand how to create medicines. And so that was something that I just wanted to get involved in. I mean, there wasn't a lot then. I mean, where I'm sitting right now in Kendall Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts, was a wasteland of old textile buildings at that time, and now it's undisputably the mecca of biotech in the whole world. I mean, there's just an extraordinary amount of activity up here, but and everywhere. I mean, I don't mean to be so parochial. Not everything revolves around Cambridge, Massachusetts. You know, as you know, I'm a big fan of New Haven. So
yes.
Anyway, someone offered me. I'd never left the country either. So a consulting firm offered me to move to Europe and start consulting, and I did that. Now, in the back of my mind, I always thought I was going to do an internship, and I would recommend to anybody who is in medical school to do the internship. Then, when I did it, which was 6 years later, when I found out it was the last year I could possibly do it without having to take all the boards all over again, you have gaps in your knowledge after 6 years. But I did that, and that was, again, a rewarding experience.
By the way, I'm just curious. I never have heard from you. Like, how do you apply for residency 6 years after you graduate from medical school? I mean, how does that work?
With great difficulty.
How did you get them to consider your application? I mean, what did you actually do to get into
it's I mean, look at me. I'm now old. So that was even the 6 years after medical school was a long time ago. But I don't remember it being that strange. I think I had to get some recommendations or something, and then I filled out applications and then went on interviews. Huh. I think that some of
I mean, at that time, it would have been unusual to have taken a 6-year gap.
It was very unusual, and I can tell you, the first few days were terrifying. Like
probably for the patients too.
The wonderful thing. I mean, I have some wonderful stories from that time. I'm sure if they had known, they would have been terrified. But no, it was great. So,
well, I would say the most important thing in internship is common sense more than knowledge.
Well, that was the other thing is that you learned at that point, you know, the 5 things that are coming in the ER, and you just get a sense of things. But I think most importantly, and this is actually, I mean, it sounds, it sounds awfully sentimental, but I think it's absolutely true. And I've seen this in the best of the companies that we've started. The appreciation for what someone is going through, a patient in these most vulnerable of times, and the fact that they are trusting you, and in fact, in many times, are depending on you to guide them through this period. It's an incredibly motivating experience. I decided after that year that the world. Patients around the world would only rejoice if I was to leave clinical care and go back to what I was doing, which was developing drugs. And so then I decided to ran this biotech company for a while. And then my wife and I founded a company based a little bit on the research that I had done, matching patients to clinical trials. So it was a thin AI system. And that's when I saw venture, because we raised a bunch of money. And that's when I decided that's what I wanted to do. And that was 23 years ago. So
I wonder, just as a juncture here, what is venture capital?
The idea is that you're putting money in that's extremely risky and hoping that you get more money back, because it doesn't, if it only you aren't able to continue to do it if no one gives you money.
But what's the
If
difference between going to you and going to a bank for a loan?
Well, the loan wants the money back no matter what. We take the loss, so I think that
It's higher
there's
risk, and
risk.
they're putting forth their
Yeah.
ideas, right? They're not putting up collateral that would, for example, be
No, there
right.
is no collateral. So, and I think that the other big difference, and I was going to get to that, and this really depends on the firm, but we're a group that likes to start companies. So it's not just money and a team and we give them money and walk away. It's often that we're starting a company with an academic group. We're working with them. We're trying to figure out does this make sense? How do we do this? Sometimes deciding some of the initial experiments, because if it's not going to work out, you'd ideally like to know that earlier rather than later. Refining some of the clinical indications when we're developing a biotech company.
Steve, you have had amazing wins over the course of your career, ones that have both returned back to your investors and to society and to patients. Just wonder if you could just give us an example of one of your favorites.
Well, I would say that one of them, and I think that this is a great example of how incremental science leads and approvals of drugs lead to further approval. So one of our very first investments was in a company called FoldRx. There's a chemist from Scripps, Jeff Kelly, who showed up in our offices with an idea for a drug for familial amyloidosis polyneuropathy. Now, that doesn't mean anything to anybody, but it's a horrible, horrible disease, the neurological form. These patients there's about 10,000, maybe a little bit more in the world. 5,000 are in Portugal. And if you probably follow Portuguese traders and missionaries in the 15th and 16th century, you know where the others are, because you carry one gene, you get the disease. And you end up in your 40s and 50s, first initially having kind of pain in your hands and your feet, and then you have other vague kind of symptoms. Eventually you are paralyzed, and then you die young. There are a bunch of known mutations. This is one of them. And Jeff had an easy way, a small molecule that he had developed that would it's because the protein called TTR falls apart. It's in flux. It spends more time instead of 4 chunks of identical protein stuck together, it's only one. And in those patients, you get amyloid accumulating in your periphery. And so this was one of these companies where we started. We ended up having to do a phase 0 study where we just studied the patients because we didn't even know what the progression of the disease was. Harlan, you're a clinical trial specialist. We ended up guessing on the outcomes in the phase 2 study. And there was one patient on ITT analysis who made the difference between hitting statistical significance or not. It was approved in Europe. It wasn't approved in the US. And ended up, patients from the US would go over to the Vatican to get the drug. I mean, it made some big difference. I think it sells over. Pfizer bought the company because it was going to be a long road after when we didn't hit the trial mark. But it now is, as you know, is used for TTR cardiomyopathy, which is a much bigger population. I think 4% of
that came from that early science. I didn't realize
that was, and so that was a time at which they wanted to develop the cardiac first, but the cardiac would have been impossible. That was an example of where someone in our office, Robert, who who's an MR physicist, said, look, you're not going to get the answers that you need. And so we steered them to neurological disease because it was more tractable. But that gave us confidence. Of course, Alnylam now has an RNAi drug for this. We will have a gene editing drug eventually. And this is a horrible, horrible disease that will be based on individual modalities eventually cured. and those patients are in a much different place than they were 5
But
years
just-
ago. And
and
that's
just-
the difference between,
But without your investment, this
Well,
doesn't go forward.
right. And I would say, I mean, maybe circling back, like there's another company we started, Beam, and there's I mean, it's part of a gene editing universe. And, and, and of course, I think most of your listeners know about CRISPR. If I could have gone back to myself when I was a medical student in New Haven in 1985 and say, in your lifetime, here's what's going to happen. We are going to take a disease like sickle cell disease, which is happening, and here's how we're going to cure it. We're going to take someone's bone marrow out. We're going to treat those cells with a molecular machine that is going to edit their genome. That will then be put back in them, and they will be cured for life. Now, that I wouldn't have even been able to comprehend, but it would have really excited me. I mean, and that's probably the little glimmer that I at least saw back then. But that is happening. Of course, those patients, and I mean, right now it's a pretty arduous treatment because of the conditioning that they have to go through. But that will change. Like those are the things, and this is maybe the big thing. I think that now we're at the point where we are going from a lot of times science to engineering in medicine. We understand not all diseases. Most of this wonderful thing that we called life is still a black box. But we, in certain circumstances and certain diseases, we are starting to understand kind of the blueprint of the disease. And once you understand that, you can develop machines, medicine to actually cure those diseases. And this is kind of an extraordinary point in human history. I mean, for me, and I use this kind of bumper sticker tagline in that class, Howie, for me, medicine is to the 21st century what physics was to the 20th century. It is just where the most exciting things are going to be happening. And so it's a privilege to be, I mean, I've overused that word, but it is indeed one to be a part of it, to be a part of the people who are to be working with people who want to cure diseases. And I think to be able to offer patients something different and getting remarkably better, my hope. Even though in the years ahead, even though we didn't get into this, I wish we did. I was going to ask you, I'm terribly worried about clinical medicine and what's going to happen with clinical medicine. We didn't talk about the kind of work we do on that side, but that's a separate matter outside of life sciences. We do a lot in healthcare delivery and IT, but I am very worried about patients getting the care, and there's lots of issues there. So maybe that's for a different podcast. If I haven't bored your listeners too much,
you have not bored our listeners.
And I can get invited back. So,
but I do want to ask you as a parting question and a quick pivot. What's your favorite place in New Haven? Having been here both as a faculty member, a student, as a parent. What's your favorite place?
I know his favorite place. Let me see if I'm right. I'm going to.
Well, I'll tell because there's a restaurant I like. Is that where you're going to go, Howard? Yeah. So I do. As an old person, I do really love the Union League. It's an indulgence. So I will say that it's an indulgence of great food and good wine. But I would say my favorite thing is actually the walk at exactly around 6 o'clock from over at SOM all the way through my little zigzag
to Union League
path through Woolsey Hall, and then going and listening to the bell tower there. It is one of the I actually think it's the most beautiful campus in the country. That's probably my favorite kind of thing in New Haven, outside of what
I agree with that
what
one.
Harlan was alluding to, which is my sybaritic tendencies. Yeah.
I'll just give one final kudos as we say goodbye to Howie, which is I have never seen anyone who's not full-time faculty, invest to the degree he does to the students
Yeah.
at Yale. He is, of
Yeah.
course, a faculty member. He teaches a class, but isn't a full-time faculty.
No,
And the degree to which he invests in individuals, way he nurtures students, he rivals you, Howie.
Well, no, he and I first bonded over this because he hired one of my students back in 2008.
Yeah. So it's
2008.
It's a really great thing to see that kind of mentorship and the willingness to meet with people morning or night when you're here. You're here a lot in New Haven, and anyway, we're lucky to have
We really are.
Well, I feel lucky to be there, and lucky to be here with all of you. So
we appreciate it.
Well, that was a great interview, and again,
It was fun.
Steve can do so many different things. He's, of course, his leader in venture capital, but such a great teacher and professor. I mean, coming and teaching class. But let's get to one of my favorite parts, the Howie Foreman part of the podcast. What's on your mind this week?
Oh, yeah, I know. We've made it to the end of October with the presidential election just 5 days away from when this gets released. And we have touched on, but not done much more about health policy as it relates to the election. So I wanted to just raise a few thoughts and then hear from you, quite frankly. So first of all, I had not, and let me ask you this first, Harlan. Have you read anything from the primary source of Project 2025, from the actual document, Project 2025?
I have not. Can you educate me a little bit?
Yeah, I hadn't done that at all until this week.
And just for listeners, I would think everyone knows this.
Yeah.
What is Project 2025?
So this was a sort of the Heritage Foundation, which is a well-known, previously well-respected think tank. It basically originated with the Reagan administration. It's been a conservative think tank, and they brought together members primarily of prior GOP administrations, many Trump administration members, to come up with a working plan so that if Trump is elected...
Including pre-Trump, when you say GOP administrations?
There are people in there that have worked in previous administrations as well.
Yeah.
Right. The document itself is a very lengthy document, and it has an awful lot in it. And there's a health section in it. And I went right to the health section this week for the first time after having heard about it for a long time, because this is supposed to be the work plan if the administration takes over. Now, in fairness, President Trump has said he has not read it, and he has said that he is not committed to it. But when you read it, you realize that there's no question this is the working plan, because all the people in it are looking to be in the Trump administration, and this is their vision. And it does align with the platform in many ways, to the extent there is a platform. I was honestly horrified by this, not the least of which is that it's a clear and transparent effort to dramatically reduce access to reproductive health care. But a lot more as well as that. It's really a blueprint to dramatically change access to abortion. And it doesn't do it just in one paragraph or another paragraph. It's systematic. It's through the FDA. It's through the CDC. It's through Medicare. It's through the way insurance is structured. It's a very committed document to that one theme. Secondly, I'll just give you three quick things and I'll let you speak about this. This idea of make America healthy again has become a theme of the Trump administration, particularly since they've joined forces with what was the RFK Jr. campaign. And I will say, at once, it is a great idea. We should all want to make America healthy again. But it's also frightening when you see who is behind it and how overly simplistic their assertions and solutions are. On the one hand, there's absolutely nothing wrong with shining a light on how our diets may be killing us, how we lean heavily on prescription drug solutions, and how we are a system that rewards solutions to sickness and not very much one that rewards maintaining wellness. I'm all in on that one. But the literal demonization of the CDC and the FDA and the many specific individuals involved with each is extremely unhelpful. And the evidence that is being used to support many of the strongest recommendations is weak at best. And finally, I just want to say, the word that RFK Jr. is seemingly the linchpin to many of the health and healthcare changes in the Trump administration is disturbing, as he has a well-documented history of being anti-vaccine as well as overly supportive of alternative therapies, even when we don't have a lot of evidence about this. So let me just, as a caveat, listeners might ask why I'm not talking about the Harris-Walz agenda. And I too feel like we should have made time to cover some key elements, but it would be like comparing a Category 5 hurricane to a degrees at the beach, and one deserves attention and the other not so much right now.
Well, and I'm surprised you're not weighing in on what they will do to Obamacare, and how many times did the Trump administration try to kill it? McCain's famous thumbs down, actually,
and they still want to. They just don't use the term "kill it" anymore.
So, and again, you didn't even touch on that, but that may be, in some ways,
no, 100%.
One of the most important things. And in the debate, he couldn't articulate really what the plan was about Obamacare.
Yeah.
But here's the thing for me, Howie. I'm really concerned about this. At the Madison Square Garden rally. Yep. Trump said regarding RFK Jr., quote, "I'm going to let him go wild on health. I'm going to let him go wild on the food. I'm going to let him go wild on medicines." On the Joe Rogan show, he said that RFK Jr. could focus on health. You can do whatever you want. I thought this was really striking, shocking. Now, I don't know whether RFK Jr. could be confirmed by the Senate, for example, as FDA commissioner, but if he's in the White House with authority, that doesn't matter because HHS is directly accountable to the president. And depending on, even without a Senate confirmation, if he's given authority within the organization. Let me just read to you what RFK Jr. tweeted, because we can end with this. But people should pay attention. People care about health and healthcare should pay attention. And neither of us have said that the FDA is perfect. And the FDA will say that they're not perfect.
That's
but
right.
Let me just tell you that FDA is extraordinary. And we're fortunate in this country to have an agency like this. And I know personally the professionals within the FDA, and these are people who are true public servants, who are deeply dedicated. And I will defend what they are trying to accomplish there. There's lots of different pressures, but it's a remarkable agency. Here's what he said. The FDA's war on public health is about to end. This includes its aggressive suppression of psychedelics, peptides, stem cells, raw milk, hyperbaric therapies, chelating compounds, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, vitamins, clean foods, sunshine, exercise, nutraceuticals, and anything else that advances human health that can't be patented by pharma. He said their war on public health is about to end because they are requiring evidence and so forth.
That's right.
These things. He says, if you work for the FDA and are part of this corrupt system, I have two messages for you. This is RFK Jr., who Trump has said, I'm going to put him in charge and let him do whatever he wants. He said, if you work for the FDA, here are the messages. Preserve your records and pack your bags.
I'm glad you got that quote in, because I had it in originally and deleted it because it was long, but I'm glad you got it in because it is insane. It's beyond, the FDA, as you said, imperfect, but across administrations, even including the Trump administration.
Harm here is, and this is like the EPA, by the way, in our environment and the climate. So yes, this isn't a political show, but this is alarming. And if you care about health, you will pay attention to what, even if they're not telling us all the details of what they're going to do, this is an important message that's coming out just before the election.
It's crystal clear.
Care about health, pay attention to this. And this is, we'll put the links in the, in the notes for the podcast, so you can see that, and for example, Madison Square Gardens, it has Trump's, the video of him, so you can see for yourself. And with that note, this is our last, isn't this our last episode before the election, Howie, right?
It is. That's right. That's what I'm saying. This is going to drop in 5 days later. Yep.
We can't tell you what to do, but we can urge you to be conscientious citizens and make good choices. You've been listening to Health and Veritas. I'm Harlan Krumholtz.
And I'm Howie Foreman. So how did we do? To give us your feedback or to keep the conversation going, email us at health.veritas@yale.edu or follow us on any of the social media.
And, we're physicians and professors at Yale, and we're trying to get closer to the truth, as Howie said. And what we're telling you, I'm just plussing down on what we
No, that's true. Good point.
I'm going back to what Howie says at the beginning of the podcast and say, we care. And we really do, care about health. And those conversations we're having about the politics really, really reflect that. So just getting back to the beginning also, we, as you can see, we very much want to hear your feedback. We can't always incorporate it into the show, but please share with us what your thoughts are, comment on us, rate us, helps other people find us.
Yes. If you have questions about the MBA for Executives program at the Yale School of Management, reach out via email for more information or check out our website at som.yale.edu/EMBA.
Thanks to our researchers Inez Giel and Sophia Stumpf and our producer Miranda Schaefer. They are amazing, and we're so grateful to have them.
I agree 100%.
Talk to you soon, Howie.
Thanks very much, Harlan. Talk to you soon.